Tonight, emergency services respond to more than 100 calls for help as wild weather lashes two states. The Treasurer stands his ground amid rumblings amongst coalition MPs over his performance. Cardinal George Pell's surprising find as he investigates the Vatican's finances. And back to the pitch, Australia's cricketers return to practice after the death of Philip Hughes. Good evening, Rachel Pupazzoni with ABC News. The Weather Bureau is tracking dangerous thunderstorms across the country in what may be a preview for more wild weather this weekend. The coasts of New South Wales and Queensland are expected to be worst hit. About 1,000 homes and businesses in Sydney are still without power after one of the storm cells passed over the city this afternoon. The State Emergency Service has responded to 130 calls for help across the state, with most calls coming from Western Sydney.
Many of these have been from storms going through Sydney, but storms are occurring in many parts of eastern New South Wales, and we are getting calls from a number of locations. Most of these relate to localised flash flooding and damage caused by fallen trees and branches, and we do have quite a few volunteer crews out in the field at present making temporary repairs to property. The advice from the Bureau of Meteorology to the SES has been tomorrow has the potential for some particularly severe storms. Some of these may affect more populated areas such as Sydney, Newcastle and Wollongong. We're just urging people in New South Wales in these affected areas do a few simple precautions, things like cleaning out your gutters and downpipes, putting away or securing loose items in your yard and balcony, and also checking your roofs in good repair can make a big difference if these storms hit. We've had probably about 6 weeks now of significant storms in New South Wales. We've got potentially another 4 or 5 days to come. We have been making sure that our volunteer crews are well prepared and well resourced and well rested, and we're confident that if people do require our assistance, we'll be able to provide that.
Let's go to the United States now, where NASA is attempting to launch its Orion spacecraft. NASA was unable to get the spacecraft into the air yesterday due to poor weather conditions and technical issues. The mission will test out the vehicle that could one day take humans to Mars. Now, we're just a few minutes away, 2 minutes away from the launch, 2.5 minutes. Let's have a listen.
At 2 minutes prior to liftoff, the team will verify that the hydraulic system is pressurized and confirm the Common Booster Core Delta Cryogenic Second Stage DCSS and Flight Termination System battery voltages.
Now, it's just after 7 o'clock local time in Cape Canaveral in Florida there.
Coming up on 2 minutes.
And as we've just heard, the launch is 2 minutes away. Now, NASA did attempt to launch Orion a number of times yesterday, but the winds meant that they were unable to launch. But it appears that they seem a lot more confident this morning.
At T-minus 1 minute 20 seconds, the team will begin securing the second stage liquid hydrogen tank.
Now, the Orion spacecraft is built to take humans further than they've ever gone before into space. And it will be eventually, NASA hopes, the craft that will carry the crew into space as part of NASA's Mars program, eventually landing humans on Mars.
LC, this is OLC. Orion nav transition is complete.
This is an unmanned test flight. It's the first test flight of Orion. It'll take about 4.5 hours to orbit the Earth
60 seconds,
twice.
the Eastern Range readiness will be verified.
CPC LH2 at flight pressure and flight level.
Working no issues.
T-minus 1 minute.
Engine start box go.
Rock, report range status.
Range green.
Now, this is the closest that they have got to launching Orion. As I mentioned last night, a number of unsuccessful attempts. But things are looking very good today.
45.
Everything is go.
Main power off.
Main power off.
40.
Upper stage LH2 secure at flight level.
35. 30.
Status check.
Go Delta.
Go Orion. Grain board.
25.
Flight lock in.
T-minus 20 seconds.
15.
Rofi ignition.
10.
The igniters have been lit.
9. 8. 7, 6,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff at dawn. The dawn of Orion and a new era of American space exploration.
Good engine control on the first stage. Passing 25 seconds. Velocity 1,341 feet per second. Passing 31 seconds, still looking good. Good engine control. Good chamber pressure in all three boosters in the full power mode. 40 seconds in. Standing by to go to the partial thrust mode in the core. And we have partial thrust command in the core. Core chamber pressure beginning to drop as expected as we're coming up on the 1 minute mark. Mark, 1 minute into the flight. Still looking good. Good chamber pressure in the core booster in the partial thrust mode. Good chamber pressure in port and starboard in full power mode.
As we watch Orion launch into space, I might give you a little bit of detail about what its mission is. As I mentioned, NASA is hoping to eventually land humans on Mars, and Orion will be part of that spacecraft that travels to Mars. This will be the part of the spacecraft that carries the astronauts. Now, this is the first test of Orion. It'll go as far high to an altitude of 5,800 kilometers into space. Now, that's 15 times higher than the International Space Station.
Now 1,341 feet per second.
This test is quite important. It will examine a range of things in outer space. It's covered with about 1,000 sensors, and they're all gathering data, and will record that and transmit that back to NASA's headquarters. Looking at things such as whether the craft can indeed withstand the temperatures that it's expected to deal with as it re-enters Earth's atmosphere of more than 2,200 degrees Celsius. And also, crucially, whether the parachutes will actually work properly to get Orion back to Earth safely. Now, this launch has clearly happened successfully, which I'm sure NASA is very pleased about after the obstacles it faced yesterday. Orion will orbit the Earth twice. It'll take about 4.5 hours, and then it will land in the Pacific Ocean. This is the first time that NASA has launched a capsule into space in 40 years.
Now weighs 1/2 as much as it did at launch, running propellant at the rate of 4,744 pounds per second.
NASA hopes to launch a second Orion capsule following the success of this one in about 4 years' time.
1 second into the flight.
That'll also be unmanned, and that will travel and orbit around the moon. And then a third proposed Orion flight is slated to take place a few years after that, and that will have astronauts on board.
3 minutes, 16 seconds in. Good engine control.
It clearly has been very successful for NASA, and I guess the results of this mission will be known in a few hours' time.
3 minutes, 30 seconds in. We're standing by for the command to go to the partial thrust mode in the port and starboard booster. That command should occur about 10 seconds from now. And we've had partial thrust command. Port and starboard should be toggling down to the partial thrust mode. Standing by for main engine cutoff. We have cutoff in the port and starboard and separation. A good separation of the port and starboard boosters.
Okay, that's where we'll leave NASA's mission. Some very impressive pictures there, and you can, of course, monitor that on NASA's website. But let's move on now. Parliament is officially on its Christmas break, with the Treasurer admitting he's on notice to improve his performance over summer. Joe Hockey says some ministerial colleagues are not happy about the budget cuts he's forced on them. But the Prime Minister is sticking by Mr Hockey.
It's parliamentary speak for Merry Christmas.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Lawmaking's over, but politics goes on.
Towards the end of the year, it gets a little bratty for some.
Joe Hockey's the target of the latest outbreak of speculation about cabinet seats.
Are you concerned your colleagues, or some of your colleagues, seem to be giving you an ultimatum to improve over the summer, or else?
No. They do that every summer.
The Treasurer says he's in constant communication about his plans to get the government back on track and how his colleagues can help.
About how they are going to help to deliver savings that keep us on a credible path back to surplus.
And are they receptive?
Well, some of them aren't too happy.
And he says money can't buy him love like it has for past Treasurers.
Peter Costello had surpluses where he could write out cheques. Wayne Swan borrowed the money to write out cheques. Someone had to say enough. We've got to live within our means. That's fallen on my shoulders.
The Prime Minister reckons Mr Hockey's got the hardest job in government.
Joe is tackling this with a will, with a purpose, with a single-mindedness and a strength of character.
Even the Immigration Minister thinks he's got it tough.
And so with Joe Hockey, I'll be brothers in arms in seeking to support him to fix the big challenges he has.
There's one less challenge for Scott Morrison after a marathon sitting last night in the wee hours. The Senate passed a bill that effectively gives the government everything it's been looking for on its asylum seeker policy.
Temporary protection visas which deny the people smugglers product.
Which means that no one coming to Australia illegally by boat can expect to get permanent residency.
We have got stronger borders at sea because of the powers we've given our maritime agency.
The price of the crossbenchers' support, an easier time for some asylum seekers who've made it to Australia already.
1,500 people coming out of detention. We've got work rights for 25,000 plus that is as a result of this bill.
This is a win for Australia. It's also a win for humanitarian values. It's a win for human decency. And I say thank you to the crossbench in the Senate.
And I commend them for their courage. I commend them for committing to dealing with the issue rather than being intimidated and browbeaten by what was a relentless and vicious campaign against them.
It's a study in contrast with the difficulties other ministers have had convincing the crossbench to side with them, which will do nothing to quell the impression Scott Morrison's star is on the rise, while others in Cabinet fall. Meanwhile, one on the Labor side also appears to be on the up and up. ACT Chief Minister Katie Gallagher's quitting to contest the Senate vacancy caused by retiring veteran Kate Lundy.
Excited, actually. I feel a bit of a burden off my shoulders.
She called Bill Shorten last night, confirming her plans to abandon the security of incumbency for the opposition benches a couple of kilometres down Commonwealth Avenue.
It's a great vote of confidence, but we've got great confidence in Katie.
So how'd you win her across?
Oh,
what did you offer her?
Offered nothing, except hard work.
The Chief Minister holds the record as the nation's longest-serving health minister and has her sights clearly set on joining the federal Labor front bench.
I want to be useful, I want to contribute. I don't want to, be crusty old sort of hanging on the back doing nothing.
She'll step down officially next Wednesday.
Voters in the South Australian seat of Fisher will decide tomorrow if they want to continue being represented by an independent or revert back to a major party. The Liberals are in the box seat, with Labor at longer odds to win the southern suburbs by-election, prompted by the death of long-standing independent MP Bob Such.
In Aberfoyle Park, the Premier and Labor candidate, Nat Cook, found a fan.
Everyone's going to vote for that? Yeah, that's right.
But the by-election increasingly appears a two-horse race between the Liberals' Heidi Harris and independent Dan Woodyat.
If Woodyat finishes in front of Labor and the Labor preferences and the preferences from the other independents go towards Woodyat, then there's every chance he could take the seat on the night.
Central to Mr Woodyat's campaign is a promise to continue the legacy of the late MP for Fisher, Bob Such. Dr Such held the seat from 1989, first as a Liberal, then independent. Mr Woodyat, a former Labor Party member, has the support of Dr Such's widow and some of his electorate staff, a threat which has prompted a negative Liberal campaign against him.
There's people that it will definitely sway, but in another way it's given me positive media because it's shown the Liberal Party tactics for what they are, the same tactics they ran against Bob in March.
We've run a very positive campaign and
That's what I'm focused on, being positive.
The latest part of that campaign is a letter critical of Mr Woodyatt from a local self-funded retiree.
That letter was written by a supporter of mine.
Did you ask him to write it?
No.
Did the party ask him to write it?
No, I don't know.
The Liberal Party later confirmed it paid for the material and says party disclosure wasn't required on the letter. Despite its own negative campaign in key marginals at the March election, Labor is taking the moral high ground.
Fisher don't want to hear about these things. The people of Fisher want to hear that they're going to have somebody that's happy to take up the issues that are important to them.
The opposition says it has been vindicated on another front, claiming the Electoral Commissioner has reversed her decision on a complaint made by Mr Woodyatt against another Liberal flyer.
We have appealed that already this morning, and we believe that the Electoral Commissioner has told us that she now understands that it wasn't misleading.
The Commissioner, Kay Mousley, was unavailable to confirm whether she has changed her decision. Angelique Johnson, ABC News, Adelaide.
Evacuations have been ordered as Super Typhoon Hagupit is set to make landfall in the Philippines sometime tomorrow. The Category 4 system, also known as Ruby, is on course for the same part of Tacloban destroyed barely 12 months ago by Super Typhoon Haiyan.
In central Tacloban, the locals are praying.
I brought the Saint Nino with us for our safety.
But they aren't leaving everything to God. People are pouring into evacuation centres or the homes of friends and family. Shelves are empty after locals stocked up on food, water and gas in preparation for the super typhoon.
They're saying now 50 provinces for 81. This is a lot worse, in that sense, so worse than Yolanda.
It's been barely a year since the Philippines was smashed by Typhoon Yolanda, also known as Typhoon Haiyan. That storm killed at least 6,000 people, and it's the deadliest on record for the Philippines. Hagupit is on the same path as Haiyan, and many fear it could be just as bad in the regions flattened and flooded last year.
Although the strength of the Typhoon Ruby is much lower than that of Yolanda, in those areas, like we mentioned, northern Samar and eastern Samar, there is a probability of storm surges, and we just advise them to be prepared.
But the nation's leaders say, if anything, the tragedy of Haiyan means the nation is better prepared for this new danger.
It's a natural phenomenon. We are prepared. But all of the preparation will be for nothing if people decide to let their imaginations run wild.
The super typhoon is also on the minds of delegates at the UN climate talks in Lima.
I would now like to make this urgent and passionate appeal to all the negotiators here in Lima. If the Philippines is the poster child for climate disasters, we are #1 in terms of being the most vulnerable country in 2013 when Super Typhoon Haiyan hit. Please, let there not be any other climate-related death.
In Tacloban, though, locals' thoughts are only about doing their best to protect their loved ones as well as their homes and businesses, many of which were only rebuilt a few months ago. Iskandar Razak, ABC News.
Cardinal George Pell, who's responsible for the Vatican's finances, says he's found millions of euros tucked away off balance sheets. Cardinal Pell, who's the Vatican's Secretariat for the Economy, says it means the Holy See's finances are better than expected. He's made the comments in the Catholic Herald in an essay outlining his vision for the Vatican. Well, for more, I'm joined by our Europe correspondent Philip Williams. Phil, how significant is this discovery and how was it revealed?
Well, it was revealed through an article with Britain's Catholic Herald magazine. That'll be published tomorrow. But what an extraordinary find that Cardinal Pell is in charge basically of the economy of the Holy See, has found not just millions but hundreds of millions of euros. We don't know how many hundreds. That could possibly convert in Australian terms to over $1 billion if it's a high hundreds. But apparently this money was squirreled away in accounts held by various departments that weren't on the books. So in effect, They had this money in the back pocket without declaring it to each other in little silos within the Vatican. George Pell was basically charged with trying to sort out the whole mess of the finances of the Vatican, and they have been described in those terms, and has come up with an extraordinary result. Not only does this mean that the Vatican's finances are in far better shape than they were, it also rebalances the whole equation in terms of where the financial situation is with that institution. So an extraordinary moment, and what we don't know yet is just how many hundreds, exactly what scale that discovery actually entails.
This is significant because obviously the Vatican has been in the news in the last 12 months or so in terms of finances. And from reading Cardinal Pell's article, he's described it in a positive way, that actually we're doing okay. But what does it say about the way the Vatican is running its business?
Well, I guess what it said is how it was run in the past, and that is pretty poorly by the sounds of things. Obviously, there have been scandals attached to the Vatican Bank. 3,000 of the 15,000 bank accounts held there have been struck off. They're accused of money laundering. But that aside, there's also the stories of maladministration, of lax administration, and clearly, if you can squirrel away hundreds of millions, it not be accounted for, incredibly poor accounting standards at the very least. He says there's no evidence of wrongdoing, but obviously this will emphasise the need for far more scrutiny, and of course that is the promise, that basically the finances of this organisation will be scrutinised by outside accounting firms in a way they've never been scrutinised before. So no doubt painful for those that have been squirreling this money away, and obviously for whatever purposes we simply don't know. But at least it seems to be dragged into the international standards in the past few months, and will in the future be required to report to a much, much higher standard than it has in the past. And hopefully George Pell says this is going to be the start of the boring phase of accounting in the Vatican, where we don't have these sort of scandals. But I guess a lot of questions will be asked. Well, there's no whiff of corruption according to George Pell, but really, what is the story behind these accounts?
Yeah, exactly. People will definitely want to dig further. And as you mentioned, he has told all the different departments within the Vatican to be prepared that they will be scrutinised like any international business, I guess. Do you think that we can expect more revelations like this then?
Well, look, we hadn't heard anything until this article about the depth of these revelations. So I would expect there will be more information eventually. But the Vatican has not been an entirely open book in terms of its finance in the past. Obviously, this is the beginning, one would hope, of a new era. But it remains to be seen just how open it becomes. And I guess one of the tests of that will be whether we find out sooner than later exactly how many hundreds of millions they've managed to find behind the couch.
Yeah, absolutely. Philip Williams in London, thank you.
Thank you.
The entire New York City police force is set to be retrained after an officer used a chokehold on a black man who later died. The incident sparked protests across the country after a grand jury decided not to indict the officer involved. The New York mayor has pledged to retrain police to prevent a repeat of the tragedy.
The training that's going to happen here in this building will change the future of this city. It will have not just an impact on thousands of people, it will have an impact on millions of people.
The latest incident comes less than 2 weeks after riots in Missouri prompted by a similar decision not to charge an officer who killed an unarmed black teenager. Australian cricket coach Darren Lehmann believes his team is ready to resume playing, but he admits he won't know for sure until the start of the first test against India on Tuesday. The Australians trained for the first time since the death of teammate Philip Hughes.
Entering the unknown, the Australian players began their preparations by easing into a training session again, something they haven't even thought about in the past week as they mourned the death of Philip Hughes.
They're looking forward to actually getting out there and playing some cricket and training and getting ready for a test match. Obviously Hughesy would want us to do that as well.
There were some laughs and then some serious work, and yet there remains a nagging doubt about their return to the game at its highest level.
Well, it's never been dealt with before. So it's obviously going to be a big challenge for us. But having said that, we're getting out to play some cricket, and that's the key for everyone.
Missing from the session was captain Michael Clarke. He arrived from Sydney late in the day and has no certainty to play with his ongoing back and hamstring issue, although the coach made clear his intention.
As long as he's fine, he can do the running and bat at the level he needs to. We'll be fine. We want our captain playing. Simple as that.
If he simply can't, then Shaun Marsh will join his bowling all-rounder brother Mitch in the lineup. Whatever happens, the Australians are promising to return to their hard-edged style, even if it's with a heavy heart and limited preparation.
We're both in the same boat, aren't we? So we've got 4 days to get ready for an important test match.
For its part, India made the most of its hastily arranged tour match, with most of its top-order batsmen getting a good hit-out on the second and final day against a Cricket Australia Invitational 11. Neil Cross, ABC News, Adelaide.
In the A-League, Melbourne Victory has won its third consecutive game after beating the Central Coast Mariners 3-0 at North Sydney Oval. After a scoreless opening half, Besart Berisha opened the scoring on the hour mark. Daniel Georgievski followed up with a contender for the goal of the season. And substitute Connor Payne scored a third to wrap up the win and preserve his side's unbeaten record. The Victory moves to second place in the standings, 1 point behind Perth Glory, while the Mariners now sit in equal 7th place. Staying with soccer, and English Premier League team Manchester City has been confirmed as the second of 3 teams to play in Melbourne next year. City will face Real Madrid in the International Champions Cup in July. The teams will play a 3-match tournament at the MCG, with 1 more side yet to be confirmed.
Cloud across the eastern states is in association with thunderstorms developing along a surface and upper level trough. Now that system is going to be very active on Saturday. Also a low pressure system forming off the south coast of New South Wales could produce some heavy rainfall about the south coast district and the ranges. We've got possible severe thunderstorms through many parts of Queensland and New South Wales, and particularly in association with very heavy rainfall. We've also got those storms across the northern half and southern districts of the Northern Territory, but generally clearer conditions across the southeast, although showers for much of Victoria. We've got a few drizzle areas around Hobart, severe thunderstorms possible in Canberra, Sydney and Brisbane.
And that is ABC News for now. I'm Rachel Pupazzoni. Stay with us. 7:30 is next.